Okay, this lesson for our Cornet Project class will address why people aren't confused because of Calvinism. We are confused because we assume Calvin was an evangelical Christian. And since we've noticed now better scholarship, let's say, for example, a Joel Webbon of Right Response Ministries correctly and very astutely stated that Calvinism is not the gospel. And when we ask ourselves, who would consider or identify themselves as an evangelical Christian, probably the largest uh, category of which I can find to use as the example. How would we associate with something called evangelical, which the very term EV is correct, angel, ANGEL, is from message. So the correct message, the good news, the glad tidings, this about Jesus Christ. So, how would we even call ourselves an evangelical and yet teach that the gospel is not essential? And remember, there is a website called Let God Be True, and in it, it has a chart showing the gospel is not the means of regeneration, rather, something less or other than. And that's remarkable. And then to teach regeneration prior to a person believing into Jesus Christ, having been persuaded by the gospel, makes the gospel non essential. Well, before we get to the board very quickly, I'll just reference that estimates suggest that approximately 7,400 people groups are still considered unreached. That's unreached by the gospel. If regeneration occurred as it doesn't, apart from the gospel, and it doesn't, the Bible says that we're fathered through the gospel, 1 Corinthians 4:15, then why do we need to take the gospel? If you recall, a Rob Bell came out teaching love wins and universalism, and a Dr. John MacArthur, a very high Calvinist, said, well, that would destroy mission work. Why go out into the fields? Why go across lands and sea? Why go into other countries? Well, that's the point about Calvinism. Since Calvinism doesn't need the gospel, regeneration occurs apart from the gospel prior to a person even believing into Jesus Christ, having been persuaded by the gospel, 1 Peter 4:17. Those who negate persuasion by the gospel of God, and that God is the Father of Jesus Christ, who points to his Son, tells us to believe his Son, tells us to mind in association with his Son and his gospel and his grace and his love and his kindness and his mercy and all that Jesus came to reveal. Well, it goes on and says unengaged means there are definitely no missionaries and in all likelihood no outreach, no church, no Christian materials, and few, if any, Bibles in these people groups. They went on to say 87% of all Hindus, Muslims, and Buddhists have limited, if any, contact with a Christian. And then number 4, it says for every dollar of Christian resources, less than 1 penny is directed at reaching unreached peoples. Well, since que sera, sera, a person is instantaneously, spontaneously combusted into a Christian, regenerated as a believer without even an object to believe, that is, Jesus Christ to believe into, and without even a gospel by which they had been persuaded, then this again are alarming statistics, because these statistics say that where there's no gospel, there's no regeneration. Calvinism says people are regenerated prior to believing into Jesus Christ, having been persuaded by the gospel. They deny that a person is fathered through the gospel. Now, again, the confusion is only because we assume that Calvin is an evangelical Christian. So we assume that in error, or we wouldn't be confused. If we heard the cults saying, as they teach, no gospel, they deny Jesus Christ, they deny his death, his burial, his resurrection, they deny that those who trust him for everlasting life are already having everlasting life, we wouldn't blink an eye. But why are we so up in arms? So I'll read some statements here. Confused because you assume that Calvin is an evangelical Christian. So we can stop that now. The problem is not Calvin's theology, it's his condition. He was not one who preached the gospel of Jesus Christ as essential, because the disciples of John Calvin don't preach that it's essential and that we're fathered through the gospel, that we're persuaded by the gospel, which speaks of the Son. As John 3:36 says, those who are believing into Jesus Christ already have an everlasting life, but those who are negating persuasion by the Son will not see life, but the wrath of God's already abiding upon him. A man says that he is an evangelical Christian, but the gospel is not essential. It's a contradiction. The word evangelical is from the word gospel. Disciples of John Calvin teach that we cannot know what the Bible means. So they will adamantly affirm that the gospel is election. They'll say it's before the foundation of the world. Of course, that phrase is not the creation of the world, but we don't want to go there with the language because they try to live by the Greek, but they don't wish to die by the Greek. But we're not here to execute people by the Greek or kill them by the Koine. We're here to edify, build up, teach, and take this truth of the good news of Jesus Christ into all the world. So it says their construct is their authority. They want to tell people about their construct. They are the authorities, not the scriptures. You'd not be confused about Calvinism if you did not assume that Calvin was an evangelical Christian. When the cults teach a different gospel, we don't express confusion because we don't assume that they are evangelical Christians. Isaiah 48 says, "The grass withereth, the flower fadeth, but the word of God, the word of our God shall stand forever." So we don't need to tamper with the word of God. Now, I took these statements, these principles, and I just substituted where this was a critique by a man named Dr. John MacArthur, who was, again, something about a man named Rob Bell who was denying the existence of hell. So I just took his words, and you'll have the video below it there in the link in the description. I'll just cut and paste this. And so it's strange that, as we've noticed before, that Universalism and Calvinism share one thing in common. Universalism says there's no eternal judgment, there's no hell, everyone eventually will be saved, so the gospel's irrelevant. Calvin says people are regenerated apart from the gospel, so the gospel's irrelevant, except the statistics say that where the gospel's not preached, people aren't being regenerated. So they have quite a strange, anti-symmetrical relationship. G3982, peithō, persuade, to induce one by words to believe. Now those words would be the gospel. We'll just go ahead and, how dare we, but we will do it. We will go and be bold enough to show the gospel is essential. Then there's a word G544, apeithēo. Here it is. There's that alpha privative. Now that's a negative particle, a negative particle. So when we want to discuss it, we're not interested in the grammatical category now. We are looking at its function. And the letter is translated multiple times in our King James Bible as without or the absence of something. And its function is negative. So it's from alpha, the letter A, and peithō. And the adjective ap-i-thace is unpersuadable. So this is where in John 3:36, it's very well worded out for those of you that use the language, negating persuasion. There we go. So it says the one who is negating persuasion, and it was by the Son. By the Son. That's John 3:36. Well, then we have this G4100 pisteuō from pistís, G4102, which is from 3982 persuasion. And to believe something is to think to be true, to be persuaded of something. So here we're being persuaded by the Son that he is the Son of God, he is the Lamb from God, he is the Messiah that would suffer for the people and bring light to the Gentiles. G569, apisteō. There's the alpha privative again. This is from alpha and pistos, G4103, and this is the idea of disbelieve. Disbelieve. And isn't that something that in the Bible we have people who disbelieve, which means they are aware of it, oida, awareness, conscious of it. So there's no such thing as people blindly disbelieving. They know the object according to which they've been dissuaded. They've negated persuasion by it. That's active. They negated persuasion. 1 Peter 4:17, negators, those who are negating the gospel of God. So if you are still confused and saying we'll never be able to crack this code of Calvin, well, just notice what's missing. It in its construct concludes the gospel to be non-essential. Just as Rob Bell, for example, concludes hell is non-essential, doesn't exist. And if you hear the Calvinist rail against him, because now why do mission work? Why take the gospel into all the world? Why go out and preach the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, if thereby people are not persuaded? And essentially, apart from the gospel, no one is persuaded to believe into Jesus Christ, as Paul said, Galatians 2:16, as ones who have noticed and are continuing to notice that no kind of man is being justified out from any kind of works of any kind of law, except through faithfulness of Jesus Christ. He said, even we ourselves trusted, believed, simple form of action, into Jesus Christ, in order that we might be declared right out from his faithfulness and not out from the works of the law. For no flesh, Paul said, will be justified out from works of law. So you have a blessed day. Enjoy this lesson. But if you want to end all the confusion about your having and experiencing because of John Calvin, and then, of course, the disciples of John Calvin and their version of Calvinism, ever-changing, always subjective, it's because you are assuming they're evangelical Christians, and the scriptures are the authority. We have one doctrine of grace. It's called the gospel of the grace of God. We don't have multivariate doctrines of grace that we can somehow merge together as a euphemism for Calvin's construct. So you have a blessed day. Enjoy this good news about the surety of the scriptures, the authority of the Bible, and the doctrine of grace, the gospel of the grace of God. Have a blessed day.